Let's talk about two surprising things that happened this week, unrelated to the playoffs. The Chicago Sky fired head coach Teresa Weatherspoon less than a year from less than a year removed from hiring her to be the head coach of the team. And Kurt Miller, after 2 years in LA, has also been fired. I don't want to pit the two against each other, Martin, but which one would you say was a more surprising fire?
Oh, there's no question which one it is. I mean, Spoon is shocking. Everyone is shocked about that, right? I mean, I think she wasn't the perfect coach. There were things that I wasn't crazy about watching them play. I thought offensively they were missing something. She's a defensive coach. She's old school. She's grit and grind. She's hard-nosed. But that kind of identity it seemed to be so perfect for that team. For Angel Reese in particular, your star player who anyone knows was going to be devastated when you let this woman go. That alone, the audacity to let this woman go when you know what she is to your star player, that speaks volumes to the ineptitude, the dysfunction. I mean, people are going in on the Chicago Sky on the internet today because no matter what you think of Teresa Weatherspoon, the locker room dynamics, the personality dynamics, the Angel Reese dynamic, this is who these players wanted to play for. And there are certain details that are interesting. I mean, they hired the GM after her, so clearly she wasn't a hire of his. There's clearly some pecking order where I guess some people have said that she wasn't easy to work with, which I can believe because Teaspoon is hard-nosed. She is the way she is. Mm-hmm. But man, to do it that way, to do it now, again, when it seemed like she was the coach for that group, that's totally shocking.
Here's something that I found interesting to me. So the Chicago Sky released a statement, obviously addressing the firing. And in the second paragraph, I guess, it says, "We remain steadfastly committed to being a playoff and championship contender every year, and we will be embarking on a thorough search for our next head coach." That might be the biggest piece of poo I've ever heard.
That's just your typical PR statement.
It is. But
you just got to write
here's
it.
The thing. When I think about this Chicago Sky team, and this is something I've been saying to people all year long, especially those who've been trying to compare the Sky to the Fever. We're talking about in year one of a rebuild, coming off of an offseason where you traded away your best player, coming into an offseason where you didn't really have much draft capital, but you somehow were able to have 2 top 8 picks in which you drafted Camila Cardoso, who, if she played a full season, would have probably had a much stronger case for Rookie of the Year potentially. Angel Reese, who was in the Rookie of the Year race, whether you like it or not, for a considerable part of the season before Caitlin really started to pull away. You talking about a basketball team who, before Angel's injury, before Kennedy Carter had COVID, they were in the 8th seed. And even without those 2 players and Camilla, who I think got shut down maybe 2 or 3 games before the end of the season, they still had a chance to make the playoffs on the last night of the season. So when we talk about as a lot of people have talked about on Twitter, like grace and opportunity and a window to actually make a difference, what more could you have asked for Teresa Weatherspoon in year one in Chicago, considering what she walked into and looking at how they ended? Like, what more could she have done? She first of all, she spoke Kennedy Carter's language, spoke life into Kennedy Carter, and contributed to what was, I would probably say, is the best season of Kennedy Carter's career. She spoke life into Angel Reese, spoke Angel Reese's language, and empowered Angel Reese to go out there every single night and be the best basketball player that she could be. What more can you ask from a head coach in year one of a rebuild than to be in the running on the last night of the regular season to make the playoffs? I don't know what more could have been done. And so, to reference Markeisha Grant real quick, who shouted out on Twitter, and you quoted it from our page, if Spoon wasn't the person, like, who does Chicago think is going to be able to coach Camila Cardoso and Angel Reese and Kennedy and Michaela and Diamond like Teaspoon? Who? What former player or what not currently employed coach can you
Right.
call and say, hey, we think you can do this job better than Teaspoon? Who is that person?
You know what it makes me think of, bro? It makes me think that they are treating her like Mark Jackson and they want their Steve Kerr. Someone over there doesn't want a motivational speaker. They don't want someone speaking. They want someone who's going to get them 85 points a game, drawing up magic. They want an offensive guru. It almost makes you think of what Phoenix did, bringing in someone from the outside in, an NBA guy. Like it's like, I feel like, and there's no way to even predict ownership in Chicago. I mean, between the players they've lost, the personnel they've been going through, like there's no way to really gauge. That's why I said that statement, like, who cares? One in, out the other. They're just going to say what they say. There's no way to actually know what they actually think they're doing, and if they even know what they're doing. But to me, the only thing I'm looking at, and I'm not trying to justify it or say that I even agree with it, but the side where I look at, like, because again, I saw some deficiencies when I would watch Chicago just offensively. I felt like they needed a little more of an identity, and maybe someone, again, this is just speculation, maybe someone wanted to see a little more out of an Angel Reese, for instance, who we know has offensive limitations and struggles. Just her first year, their first year in the team as a rebuild. That's why this stuff just really doesn't end up making sense. But again, that's who Spoon is. And not to say players weren't going to get better going forward. Of course they were. But I just think, just bottom line, and maybe it's my bias, it's where I think the game is right now in general, but I think they're looking for a more offensive mind. I think they're looking for someone who might focus more on like the skill development of Angel Reese as opposed to like speaking life into her, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. But when you have a player like Angel Reese who's been through what she's been through, making sure that she can go out there every night and play confident basketball, I would say should be a priority.
I totally agree. I mean, Mike Hughes said they should go get Kim Mulkey. Mike Hughes said they might as well just grab Mulkey. Like, Jesus, man. I mean,
could you imagine Kim Mulkey?
Could you imagine?
Could you imagine? I do want to say this, and this is something else that I'm just always looking across leagues and figuring out comparisons. There's another coach currently, obviously not in her first year, but there's another coach who's in a similar situation. That's Latricia Trammell in Dallas. Mm-hmm. They didn't have Satu Sabali for the entire first part of the season, right? Satu comes back. They start putting some stuff together. They too, before they got eliminated, maybe a week and a half before the season, they had a chance. She's not fired. So that shows you
right or Tanisha wrong, depending on who you talk to.
People talk about Tanisha Wright as well, and how there's some things going on in Atlanta with the talent that they have, how things. So it's interesting to me. You have instances. Hey, I said it to you offline, and I think I might have even mentioned on the show. In Washington, like, and Mystics fans even have questions about whether or not Eric Tebow is the guy for the job.
They overachieved, though. You can't.
But they overachieved, right? So you have all these instances where at least 3 instances where you look across the league and they're kind of similar situations, and you're like, well, maybe those guys should maybe have a question mark. Or in similar situations, they were still given another chance. Why isn't Teresa Weatherspoon being given another chance? Again, when you walk into a situation that she walked into and you literally turn lemons into lemonade, and the Chicago Sky have a chance to make the playoffs as the 8th seed in this season, that to me warrants another lap around the block. That to me warrants a second year. That to me warrants a chance to make sure that Angel is healthy and ready for next season, make sure that Camilla is healthy and ready for next season, make sure we're continuing to fill out this roster, because that is a basketball team under Coach Spoon who could have made a lot of noise next season, where we're not needing to wait to the last Thursday of the regular season to punch our ticket to the playoffs. We have that locked in maybe with a month or 2 weeks to go. So lots of questions.
And I mean, Kurt Miller, again, isn't as surprising because the release from them said they mutually parted ways. So that's a different situation entirely. He had great things to say. Him and De'Erica Hamby had a nice exchange. I love that he, supported her and had great things to say about her. But I haven't been crazy about Kurt Miller as a coach, honestly. I think he's proven and he's solid.
Sure.
But I just honestly, even just looking at how he handled Rickea Jackson this season, I don't think it was egregious, but I would have loved to just see her activated more. And I don't want to put that total blame on him, but
Right.
I think Kurt Miller is a fine coach, but
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't have thought he would be the one to take them to the promised land either.
sure.
And I'm interested to see what names. I've seen Katie Smith's name floating out there, possibly for LA. People have been talking about Spoon in LA. I don't think that's where they're going. They probably have their sights set on somebody. I saw Katie Smith out there, but it's going to be interesting what crop of coaches are about to, because it feels like, again, in Phoenix, they brought in an outsider. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how the coaching carousel starts to develop in the W.
Real thing before we get into the semifinal matchups that start on Sunday, do you think either of these two are going to find another coaching job in the league?
Yes, I do. People have brought up Spoon in Atlanta if Tanisha Wright were to get out of there. I do. I think both of them. I wonder if they would want to be assistants or if they'd have to be head coaches. I don't know if that's a deal breaker for them, but I mean, yeah, I could see them on the staff. Teaspoon, I wonder what's going to happen with her. I feel like some people are going to be calling her, maybe the NBA. I mean, she was with the Pelicans, like
Yeah.
maybe like, bro, people are going to be calling Teaspoon for sure. And I would say Kurt Miller